Hello again, everyone, and thank you once again for joining us for Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather on this 26th day of September 2020. 4 more days of the month left till we hit October. And from there, we'll go right into we got a October storm moving into the Northeast Gulf tomorrow. There's high wind warnings out for the highlighted areas there of the Southeast coast. Prince of Wales Island into the Central Panhandle from Sitka, Mount Edgecombe, Port Alexander, into the Juneau, Admiralty Island areas, and that's for 1 p.m. tomorrow until 10 p.m. Sunday night or Sunday evening, and that's for winds. Again, high wind warnings, 25 to 35 miles an hour sustained with gusts above 60 miles per hour in those areas. Go along with that, there's a storm and hurricane force wind warnings out along the north coast of the Panhandle, especially the North Gulf Coast, and storm warnings and gales just about everywhere else with this storm. Otherwise, no warnings or watches out around the remainder of the state. And from there, we'll look at satellite imagery, and you can see the cloud shield with that next storm making a pretty good jog to the northeast there, so being pushed along by a very strong southwest jet associated with the whole upper level complex. You can actually see the back edge of the frontal boundary there just coming onto the south part of the map there in the last couple of frames. Otherwise, up over the interior, you can see areas of clearing around Fairbanks, Northway, a little bit over the upper Yukon Valley, and also out west there from Kotzebue and Noatak Valley across the Seward Peninsula, areas of sunshine this afternoon, and a few breaks over the west central interior. Otherwise, mostly cloudy south central Alaska. Trough moving up to the North Gulf Coast today brought rain with it. Seward picked up about half an inch in the last 12 hours, ending at 3 p.m. this afternoon, while Portage had about 1/4 inch of precipitation. Southeast coast, showers and rain tapering off there as higher pressure in advance of that system pushes in. You can see quite a bit of clearing occurring there along the coast and in the south, and that'll continue. Still some areas picked up about 1/3 of an inch at Yakutat precipitation, and Cake had about, check my notes here. Cake had about 1/4 of an inch of precipitation. Otherwise, across southern Cook Inlet, about the same amount, 1/4 an inch of rainfall at Kaliganek there. And again, Seward picked up 1/2 an inch. Out over the Bering Sea, still northerly flow and mostly cloudy skies, a few sun breaks, especially over Adak and the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula as well, maybe even the Pribilofs. But still a lot of clouds and very light shower activity with that, northerly winds of 25 to 35 miles an hour. And there's still weak low pressure keeping it showery over the western central Aleutians. On the chart today, you can see the moisture out there over the Bering Sea, along with some clearing that I didn't really depict here on the chart, but there was some, like over the western interior and in the interior today, and then the trough up along the North Gulf Coast that's washing out and weakening. And again, some clearing showing up along the central and south part of the southeast coast. The showers tapering off and should end here over the next couple hours. Then the next big storm you can see down well south of Kodiak Island, 970 millibars today. Tonight that'll deepen to 961 millibars and move northeastward. You can see the tightening of the pressure gradient there right across Kodiak Island and in up toward the southern and offshore areas of the Panhandle and North Gulf Coast. Winds and precipitation will be increasing across just about all of southern Alaska with the exception of Bristol Bay. Should stay dry, but maybe even but cloudy, and winds will stay breezy over the Alaska Peninsula, and the gradient will start to tighten up over the northern Bering Sea a little bit there as it slackens off over the western Aleutians and even about the entire stretch of the Aleutians. Still some scattered showers going on out there. And rain, fog, drizzle, or showers of the light variety are possible anywhere over the eastern and northern Bering Sea. Will be more of a mixed condition for St. Lawrence Island. Flurries, light snow showers, negligible accumulations for the North Slope and the Arctic coast. And then for tomorrow, that strong storm continues to move northeastward right into the Gulf of Alaska, south of Resurrection Bay. or south-southeast of Resurrection Bay. By late in the afternoon, deepening to about 959 millibars, and that's going to push or result in hurricane force wind warnings are out for the North Gulf Coast. Sustained 65 knot winds and storm warnings and gales and hurricane force winds really for the southeast coast, North Gulf Coast areas, and rain, heavy rain over the northern panhandle, especially Yakutat and Lituya Bay, those areas, and moderate rainfall down farther to the south. Could be heavy at times there as well. And again, the high wind warnings start kicking in at about 1 p.m. or midday tomorrow, and will continue through most of the evening until the front pushes through and the low begins to weaken. Up to the north, no change. Actually, in the interior, no change. The exception being moisture starting to pull westward in to the upper Tanana Valley, 40-mile country, in the eastern Copper River Basin in the afternoon due to that system and the easterly flow. Otherwise, not much change out over the Bering Sea. A little breezier, as I mentioned, over the northern central Bering Sea. And actually, winds will start to pick up a little bit there for the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula, but nothing too terribly strong. And from there, we'll go to the outlook for Monday. That system moves through and actually pulls up in the interior and weakens quite a bit, and high pressure at the surface builds in over the southern panhandle, and that'll be enough to shut the moisture off and probably result in some clearing in the afternoon there for dry conditions, but not enough to keep the shut the moisture off over the northern panhandle. Still a pretty good chance of showers and even occasional rain from Elfin Cove up to Yakutat. North Gulf Coast, same thing. Showers, Copper River Basin, isolated rain and snow showers over the eastern interior, but again, the western central areas into Cook Inlet, looking at partly to mostly sunny skies. Lows tonight in the 30s, highs tomorrow, upper 20s, lower 30s north, and mid to upper 50s south, and then lows and highs on Monday about the same.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving into flying weather for Sunday morning. Back up one here. There we go. IFR North Slope and along the Arctic coast, especially on the west side there, extending down to the north coast of the Seward Peninsula, say Shishmaref on over to Wales and Tin City, and marginal VFR to St. Lawrence Island, St. Matthew Island, as well as the Pribilofs, and IFR Nunivak Island and from Kuskokwim Bay up along the Yukon Delta coast, and then eastward along the south coast of Norton Sound. Good swath of VFR there over the central Bering Sea, and then back to marginal for the central western Aleutians. Kodiak Island, IFR with that front extending eastward across the Gulf, pushing into the coastal areas on the central and south coast of the Panhandle. Marginal VFR on the increase, along with IFR on the increase there for southern Alaska. And VFR, Copper River Basin, eastern interior, central interior, right on up to the Noatak Valley, and as well as the Kobuk Valley. And for the afternoon, good VFR from the northwest coast there, across the Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound, and inland areas away from the Yukon Delta. VFR, Togiak Bay, Dillingham, King Salmon, Igigik, VFR, as well as Cook Inlet and the central interior. Then some marginal VFR in the increase that's going to be backing in from east to west there into the eastern Alaska Range and the upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country to about Eagle. IFR decreasing over the Panhandle. Looks like VFR showing up late in the afternoon on Prince of Wales Island there, maybe Heidelberg. Otherwise, some IFR, Trinity Islands and Sitkinak, otherwise Kodiak Island, marginal into southern Cook Inlet. And for Monday morning, IFR Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast, Wrangell Mountains to Yakutat. Marginal VFR for the Panhandle and IFR Alaska Peninsula, Unalaska Island. And just a small zone of IFR there, south and southeast of Bethel, up along the Kuskokwim Mountains a little bit, southern areas. And IFR more extensive, though, Brooks Range, North Slope on out to the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Marginal VFR, eastern interior. VFR in the western interior there, even the northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island. And some good VFR for Adak and Atka in the western Bering, but marginal VFR just up north, far enough north to catch Amchitka, Kiska, Shimmy, and Attu. And for the afternoon Monday, IFR eastern Beaufort Sea coast, eastern North Slope there to about the Brooks Range on the east side, and some IFR also on the western Arctic coast. VFR, Kivalina, Selwyn, Noatak Valley area, Seward Peninsula, much of the western interior into Cook Inlet. Some marginal VFR, Iliamna Lake and the Alaska Peninsula Aleutian Range area in the southwest coast. Eastern Bering marginal to the Pribilofs to Atka, Adak, Shimia, Shimia marginal VFR, Adak VFR, and for Northern Kodiak Island, IFR, right up the south coast of the Kenai Peninsula. Prince William Sound socked in with IFR eastward along the North Gulf Coast, but some pretty good VFR showing up now over the central panhandle. And Atuvik and Adigan both look marginal VFR at times tomorrow, possibly IFR at times, but optimistically I went with marginal VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal to start early, but by mid-morning VFR through the afternoon. Same forecast for rainy, a little bit of marginal VFR possible early on, then VFR, windy VFR the entire day. Isabel, VFR the entire day, and Mentasta starting out VFR becoming marginal with the moisture pulling in from the east-southeast, increasing from that direction, and Tanita staying VFR the entire day. Portage, marginal VFR becoming IFR. Chilcoot and White, IFR. And for the freezing levels, 2,000 to 4,000 feet just south of the Brooks Range, otherwise 4,000 to 6,000 feet North Gulf Coast. You can see the tight gradient there associated with the southerly push ahead of that frontal boundary, 12,000 feet up off the south coast of the Panhandle, out west 2,000 feet down to the eastern Aleutians. Icing, look for considerable moderate rime icing ahead along in advance of the frontal system as pushes in the Panhandle tomorrow, and that'll kind of hang up along the North Gulf Coast and then slowly diminish there or become narrower as you head west along the Kenai Peninsula and the Kodiak Island. Interior looking pretty good as far as icing goes. And the Bering Sea, just some areas of potential icing of the mixed variety. And for strong jet stream here, the 33,000 foot wind flow chart, 150 knots aimed right up at the Panhandle associated with that system. And at 9,000 feet, 80 to 90 knot winds there, 65 knots southeasterlies into Prince William Sound, northerlies 35 to 40 knots over the eastern Bering Sea there from the Bering Strait southward to the Fox Islands. 80 to 85 knots, North Gulf Coast Panhandle translates into severe turbulence in that band there, southern Prince William Sound on down to about Elfin Cove, below 4,000 to 6,000 feet. Otherwise, light or moderate chop.
When I first started working here in the early 90s, this is where the glacier was. I mean, where we're walking right now would have been a pile of gravel that had been pushed up by the glacier, and then we would have had 100 to 200 foot high cliffs of ice right here. And as you can see, that's changed quite a bit. And if you look at that in 2 dimensions, you can sort of see the terminus used to be here, now it's back there. That gives you one measure. What that kind of 2-dimensional look doesn't show is how much mass has been lost, that the glacier has just sort of deflated. These 200-foot cliffs of ice have disappeared and pulled back to this gentle sloping glacier you see now.
When I was working in Kenai Fjords National Park, I used the topographic maps to navigate where I was, and I realized that the mapping of the glaciers was really off. The glaciers had receded a lot. There were new rivers and lakes that were establishing where the ice used to be or should have been according to the maps. And so then I did a study on this and found out that we had a 5% loss of glacier ice mass in the Kenai Fjords area between 1950 and 1985. Big change.
You know, one of the most compelling things we do, though, to document glacier change is simply take photographs. We've had repeat photography projects here at the park. They may not give you the most accurate data in terms of how much mass or real specific measurements, but what they do give you is a visual representation that can't be argued with. I mean, it really requires no interpretation.
Understanding what's happening, understanding these processes, and possibly being able to predict what's going to happen in the future is the best that we can do, and that requires science and research.
There's considerable research on climate change in Alaska. The most significant, I would say right now, is the Natural Resources Inventory and Monitoring Program, which is looking at change across a wide variety of vital signs or indicators.
Kenai Fjords National Park is actually a pretty good representation of what's going on globally with regards to glacier ice retreat. There have been studies showing that mountain glaciers are retreating all over the planet. There are probably well over 90% of the glaciers are in retreat status. There are a few that are advancing, and some are holding their terminus point. But at Kenai Fjords, the tidewater glaciers are retreating more dramatically, but even the land-based glaciers in the terminus positions are retreating. It's pretty common for all the mountain glaciers. The big mountain glaciers in Wrangell St. Elias National Park, they're mostly in retreat too. We're really entering an interesting phase where what we call the cryosphere, the ice on the planet, is melting.
You know, in the more immediate past, it's clear that since the Pleistocene, glaciers have been retreating. So the idea that glaciers retreat is nothing, is no revelation. They've been retreating from across North America for the last 10,000 years. What appears to have changed and what has people's attention is the rate at which they're retreating. In the case of Exit Glacier, you know, we have scientists who've been looking at it. We have evidence that the glaciers left behind, where we can track that retreat for about the last 200 years. And we can say with confidence that in the last decade, that rate has increased.
Terminus mapping is a great way to map a small portion of the ice field. We come out twice a year and we use a GPS to walk the edge of the terminus and map the farthest extent of Exit Glacier. And that allows us to see what type of changes are occurring over the winter accumulation period and the summer ablation period. With that data, that can help us as we witness these changes within the ice field. We can hopefully be able to correlate that with the weather data that we have.
You know, when you look at an ice field that's 750 square miles, when you look at a glacier that towers hundreds of feet high, you get a sense of permanence. You think these things are massive, they're somehow a permanent sort of feature, and yet in a very short period of time, in a matter of a couple of decades, we've seen dramatic change in those things.
At Exit Glacier, we have a time-lapse camera set up on the glacier that allows us to take a couple photos every single day, and then to put that sequence of photos into a video where we can see changes of the glacier and the vegetation phenology throughout an entire year.
Virtually all the glaciers in Alaska are receding. Some glaciers are moving forward. That's not an indication that they're actually growing in size. It's just the rate at which they're slipping down the mountain.
In some cases, some of these glaciers are receding back up onto land, and so they're producing less ice. When you change the glacier systems, you're changing habitat for marine mammals and other wildlife. And the populations of harbor seals have dropped dramatically in the fjords. In 1980, shortly after the establishment of the park, in Island Bay, we had maybe 1,500 harbor seals. Nowadays, you know, it's a few hundred.
In Arctic environments, much of the sunlight that reaches the Earth bounces back because it hits snow and reflects off into space, or ice on the ocean and reflects off into space. That's the albedo effect. When the snow thaws and instead you have rock or vegetation, or when the ice thaws and you have transparent ocean, the sunlight will convert to other wavelengths. It'll convert essentially to warmth. That does not bounce back into the atmosphere as much. So consequently, you get a warming of the ocean, you get a warming of the ground, you get a thawing of frozen soils or permafrost, you get a more rapid thawing of sea ice. So once the ice and once the snow is off of the surface, the rate of warming increases considerably.
If you're driving out to Exit Glacier, you'll actually start to see signs along the side of the road that have dates on them. Visitors sometimes are confused. They think they're elevations or something until they get up to the glacier and realize, oh, those were all date signs along the road that were telling me when the glacier was there. Another thing that's been happening in the Exit Glacier area in recent years is this flooding that comes at a time we're not used to. We're used to having maybe some flooding in the fall when we have a lot of heavy rain. This has suddenly been some flooding that's coming in the middle of the summer, usually not associated with precipitation events. It's associated with warmer weather and melting. When you walk down one of our trails that leads to Exit Glacier, there are a number of ways to get out there, but what used to be the main route is no longer really the main route because of the way the glacier has changed. So this main route to the glacier used to provide dramatic views of the glacier as you walk towards it. In fact, there was a large kiosk built at the end of this trail for people to stop and rest and enjoy the view of the glacier. Now, if they stop and rest at this kiosk, people think, why did the park put a kiosk here? Because it looks out at some shrubs. there's no glacier within view anymore.
The way we solve big problems like this is not all at once. There's a thing called the Sokolov's wedges, and you just take a little bite of the pie, one sliver at a time. So we try to do incremental changes.
When we talk to people about our concerns about climate change, about the changes that are happening to the glacier, we also want to leave them with some idea of what we're doing to mitigate some of the effects of climate change. For example, here at the park, as we retire vehicles out of our fleet, we try to replace them with electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles. We've done things like at the Glacier Nature Center, helping to sort of experiment and install a cutting-edge fuel cell as opposed to running some traditional power source out there that relies on some sort of more greenhouse-producing gas.
My main hope for the future is that people get the message that the planet is changing fairly rapidly in places, particularly places like Kenai Fjords National Park, and that it is, we think, there's good evidence it's a result of atmospheric changes, which are measured in terms of human inputs into the atmosphere.
The rapid rate at which these glaciers are changing now offers us the opportunity to talk about this place as a way of looking into the future. In a lot of parts of the country, climate change issues are a little more subtle, and we can point here and say, look how fast this is changing. This is what the future holds for perhaps a lot of us and a lot of the planet as climate continues to change.
I'm optimistic that people and nature will adapt to change, but my expectation is that change will occur. Time will tell.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at the marine forecast on the south coast, we've got gale warnings, Prince of Wales Island, southwest 45 knots. Clarence Strait, though, full gales, high-end gales, just under storm force, southeast 45 sustained, seas 13 feet. Stevens Passage, southeast at 30 with 6-foot seas. And for Lynn Canal, south 25, gusts 40. Otherwise, on the central and north coast of the Panhandle, or actually the entire north coast there, storm warnings, 50 to 60 knot winds from the south, becoming east up toward Yakutat, seas as high as 26 feet. And moving on to Monday, still winds really lightening up in the southern areas there, 10 to 15 knots from the south-southwest, Clarence Strait down to 10 knots, and then the south coast 15. But seas still 23 feet, take a little longer for those to subside. And then 20-knot winds pick up to about 30 knots on the north coast, to 40 knots there along the coast by Yakutat from the southwest. And Lynn Canal, south 30 knots, seas 6 feet. Stevens Passage, southeast 20 with 4-foot seas. And for Prince William Sound tomorrow, quite a windy day coming up there with northeast winds sustained 40 knots, good gales, full gales there, gusts 50 knots. And hurricane force wind warnings for the North Gulf Coast, Middleton Island area, east 65 knots, northeast 65 there for the western North Gulf Coast, as well as the Barren Islands, northeast winds 65 knots, 22-foot seas. Southern Cook Inlet, storm warnings out tomorrow for northeast winds of 50 knots with 14-foot seas, northeast 50 for Kamishak Bay, and northern Cook Inlet, 30-knot winds out of the north with 8-foot seas. And then for Monday, southerly winds, 15 knots for Cook Inlet, Kamishak Bay southwest 20, and the Barren Islands down under gale force, but the North Gulf Coast at minimum gales from the southwest at 35 knots, and Prince William Sound south 25 knots, seas 6 feet. Kodiak Island tomorrow, north to northwest winds sustained 40 knots, higher gusts, definitely out of the bays, say Woman's Bay, and seas as high as 21 feet. And then from Sitkinak to Castle Cape, also northwest winds 40 knots. The Alaska Peninsula, lighter winds, northwest 20 to 25 knots, and Bristol Bay north at 20. Outlook for Monday, Kodiak Island, southwest 25 to 30 knots, and from Sitkinak to Castle Cape, small craft advisories there as well, southwest 25, but Bristol Bay north 15. And north 20 knots on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, and from Cape Sherchef to Castle Cape, west winds at 20 knots. For the Fox Islands tomorrow, we've got north to northwest winds, call it northwest around Alaska Island, north for Unimak Island, and good, high enough for small craft advisories, as well as the seas running 7 to 11 feet. Adak north to northwest 25 knots or 20 to 25 knots, and 20 knot winds all the way out to Shemya. And for Monday, small craft advisories continue for the Fox Islands, north to northwest at 25, seas 7 to 11 feet, northwest 25, Adak 7 to 10 foot seas. And for Amchitka Island, west 15 knots, seas 7 feet, and small craft advisories for Kiska, Shemya, and Attu for southeast winds at 25. For the southwest coast, north winds 20 to 30 knots, strongest north along the Yukon Delta coast and lightest south of Nunivak Island, but 30 knot winds for the Pribilofs, 30 knot winds out of the north also for St. Matthew Island, and north winds 25 for St. Matthew Island and Norton Sound. And then for Monday, small craft advisories continue for the St. Lawrence Island areas, as well as the Yukon Delta coast and the Kuskokwim Delta coast as well. All those winds north 25 knots, seas 6 to 7 feet. Pribilofs north 25, northwest 20 for St. Matthew Island, and Norton Sound north at 15. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, east to northeast winds 15 knots, central coast east at 10, back to northeast 15 on the west side, and then small craft advisories from Cape Beaufort to Wales for north to northeast winds at 25 knots. And then on Monday, 20 knot winds from the north, Wales to Cape Thompson, and then northeast or east northeast 15 for the western Arctic coast and the eastern Arctic coast, north to northeast at 15 knots, central coast pretty light, east at 10. For tonight, again, that big storm bringing the gale force winds definitely into Kodiak Island overnight tonight, with rain becoming moderate, possibly heavy at times as well, and wind and rain on the increase for the North Gulf Coast as well as south central Alaska, and definitely for the Panhandle. The interior stays dry and variably cloudy, and some flurries along the Arctic coast, and unsettled out over the Bering Sea. No change in that pattern out west through tomorrow, except high pressure building into the far western Bering Sea and the Komodorskis. Otherwise, hurricane force wind warnings, storm warnings, heavy rain for the Panhandle, North Gulf Coast, high wind warnings for the Juneau area and other areas of the Panhandle, gusts 60 miles an hour or greater. And then it tapers off on Monday. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.